Which for anybody who knows me, that's like super ironic. And now we're recording this. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the District of Clearwater Council meeting for Tuesday, October 18th. My name is Shelley Sim. I wasn't aware that I was going to get to sit in this chair. And so I'm delighted that we can all use this as a learning experience. I call this meeting to order and beg for forgiveness in advance. To begin, I would like to acknowledge that we are fortunate to be gathering together on the unceded territory of the Símpcwemc, who have been caretakers of this land since time immemorial. Do we have any late items? Oh, that's terrific. Thanks. We're going to move to item number 4. Do we have any extra copies of the agenda for our audience members? Yeah. I don't know if anybody would like one. Would you like a? We've printed them, so why not, huh? So we have the agenda for October the 18th, the 2022 regular council meeting. There is a recommendation that the agenda for the October 18th regular council meeting is to be approved as presented.
I'll second it.
Motion by Councillor Mackenzie, seconded by Councillor Taylor. All in favor? That's great. Adoption of the minutes. Motion that the minutes of the regular council meeting held October 4th, 2022 be adopted. Motion by Councillor Frizzle, seconded by Councillor Haring. All in favor? That carries. Okay, we have no development and zoning. We have some unfinished business, flood mitigation. So this is a staff report on a grant application. Would staff like to speak to this?
Yeah, this just concerns a matter that was before council at the October 4th meeting. You passed a similar resolution in support of this application that staff had already made. The ministry got back to us just that the wording was not quite right, establishing that council supports the particular program and coming from the particular funding stream.
So the grant as included is what we're submitting with the revisions. Is that correct?
I believe the grant has already been submitted. This
okay.
Is just the certified resolution needs to be sent in that council is supporting along these terms.
Great. So there is a motion on page 2. If anybody would like to make that, that's Councillor Haring. Okay, and just for the benefit of those listening or who want to watch the recording, that council supports the extended flood mapping and mitigation plan presented in this grant application and commits to providing overall grant management for this project submitted under the risk mapping assessment and planning, risk MAP, and non-structural and small scale project stream. Any discussion on this motion? I think probably only to say that we're really grateful to staff for having done this, and that the systems within Clearwater will ideally be strengthened because of it. I think we've all agreed that this is a really important part of our infrastructure, and hopefully we will be successful with this. So all in favor? Great, and that motion carries. At this time, I'd like to report that we finished page 1. Great. We have no public and statutory hearings, no presentations, no delegations. The mayor's report, there is none. I will report that the mayor is absent and extends his regrets. He is at the Boundaries Commission presentation, and I'm really glad that he was able to represent Clearwater as well as the mayor from Barrier. He also went down with a contingent from the community, all speaking to why the proposed boundary lines are maybe not in the best interest of Clearwater. The mayor's able to speak quite eloquently about it. If the proposed boundary changes were to move forward, it would have us in alignment with the Caribou, which would effectively cut us off from our representation lines that come from natural trading routes. We've always been a north-south and not an east-west. Even I was just thinking this morning, should this go ahead in order to get representation, if we had an MLA in Clearwater, people from Williams Lake would have to travel, you know, the 3.5, 4 hours to seek representation, and there's no public transportation. So access to representation would be effectively cut off, and just the annihilation of many of our systems, which Interior Health, school boards, area directors, even our recreation. I think what I found really disturbing is that Wells Gray Park and Candle Creek trails would also be cut off. And these are our economic drivers, especially as we work to rebuild tourism. We can go on and on and on about emergency management and how that would be impacted, and having severed communities in the interior of BC like we are would be of great detriment. So I hope that the Boundary Commission hears what the mayor has to say. Also, there is still time to submit your thoughts on it. You can go to the BC Boundaries Commission, and there is an opportunity to submit an online submission. There's 2 virtual sessions as well. So I think that the more voices that carry, the stronger we will be in our request for change. Moving forward, Councillor Barry Banford has also extended his regrets, and we are going to totally shake things up. We are going to hear from the illustrious Councillor Lucy Taylor to start.
Thank you, Acting Mayor Sim. So I'd like to just say I joined the Trails Task Force meeting on the 11th of October. So that was a great rundown. We really went through a lot of what the goals from previous years and this year, and what we've achieved and where we're at with the different projects. So that was great to see. That would be my last meeting with the Trails Task Force. So it was a fond farewell. And congratulations to CSS boys on their gold medal win at their tournament. And I will, without bias, congratulate Kaya Phillips and Martha Taylor on being elected to student president for CSS. So, yes, without bias.
Without bias.
With total bias.
Thank you very
And
much.
that's the end of my report.
Councillor Mackenzie.
Thank you, Acting Mayor Sim. Pretty quiet couple of weeks for me. Basically, things were just focused around this past weekend, getting sorted out for the election. Did not have nothing to attend since the All Candidates Forum. Just a lot of touring around town, making some visits to some people, and that's about it. Fairly quiet couple of weeks.
Great, thanks. Councillor Haring.
Yeah, and I mean, aside from that, not much going on. Did have a lot of conversation.
That's great, thanks. Councillor Frizzle.
I concur with the election. I'm glad it's over. Just leaving that aside. It's done. I just wanted to point out that we finally, after 2.5 years, have started with, we still don't have a name, but right now I'm calling them techie seniors because it used to be called something else. And the students are back helping the seniors with their technological, well, I can't even say it now, technology issues. And we've had 2 sessions and they've been a full house and they've been busy and they've been very helpful. And thank you for having your daughter allowing your daughter to come and do that. That's great. They're really good kids and it's just nice to have them back. And there's 2.5 years worth of problems to deal with.
And upgrades and all sorts of things. Great. So for my report, I'm going to echo the congratulations to the boys soccer team. I just think it's just magnificent the fact that we have a team that's coached by 2 volunteers who are incredibly passionate and are really leaning in and helping those boys find their place in space and feel pretty good about their efforts. Without bias, I'd like to acknowledge Owen Sim for having made it to council and learning about speeches. So that was fun to work with. Also, just to congratulate Yellowhead Community Services on having a new CEO. Jack Keogh is returning to the position from what I understand. coming out of the retirement. That wasn't shared by Jack Keogh. It was shared by an affiliate organization who was quite pleased to have him back working on that. Just want to do a shout out for the coffee house that's being put on by Valley Pride this coming Friday. And I believe that that's at the Elks Hall. Donation is $2 and to bring a food item. So it's really nice to see that group getting active. And I think just on the election, just what a wonderful opportunity to hear from people. And, you know, to have such a broad voice and choice and to be able to reflect on issues. And I think what's really important is to listen to what we heard and make sure that we bring all of that back to the table and that we lean in and do the work of what it is to build and rebuild community connections so that everyone feels that they have place and space and feel that they belong and have the opportunity to thrive. It was an awesome time, and I think we learned lots from what was said, and I think we can all hear that and lean into that. So moving on, Committee of the Whole minutes. I don't see that we have any. Thank goodness. Committee of the Whole reports, government operations.
So the next meeting is November 15th.
Great. And on behalf of Councillor Banford, the Community Economic Development and Infrastructure, the next meeting is November the 1st. And the next Park and Recreation and Social Development meeting is in 2023. We have no standing reports, but we move on to select committee reports. Trails Task Force.
The next meeting is November 8th.
Did you want to reflect on anything from the meeting last night at all, or no, not yet? Keep us posted, or
Last week.
last week, yeah.
Yeah, so I kind of mentioned it in my report. We reviewed kind of the goals for the year and where we were with the different projects. There are two, well, at least one applicant for certain to be a new member of the Trails Task Force, but I don't think we have the recommendation ready for that.
It'll be on the next agenda.
Next agenda. So there could be one or two more people, and maybe I'll come back as a private member, community member.
I'm
You
sure
never
that
know.
they would
We'll
welcome
see.
your voice and your.
I said maybe.
your Let the record reflect that Councillor Taylor said she would be delighted to return. Yeah, and I have noted that, you know, the Dutch Lake ongoing contributions for public feedback continue. So that's exciting. And I think that that really gives us a project to look forward to for next year and how to make that area something that everybody really appreciates. Community Economic Development Task Force. And the Cemetery Advisory Committee, that is Councillor Banford, and the next meeting is November 8th. From what I understand from that committee, it is such a thoughtful committee and, you know, taking on something that's important at a certain time of life. And so I'm grateful for their work as well. Committee representation reports, Tourism Wells Grey, you have attached the minutes from the last meeting. There is a meeting coming up this week. Tomorrow, are you able? And okay, thank you very much, Councillor Frizzle. I will say that I believe that Tourism Wells Grey also presented at the Boundaries Commission, noting that impact for them. So that was good. So that there is a recommendation that the minutes from the September 26th, 2022 board meeting of Tourism Wells Grey be received. Motioned by Councillor Frizzle, seconded by Councillor Mackenzie. Any discussion or questions on those? Great. All those in favor? Super. And the Wells Grey Community Forest Commission, again, that's Councillor Banford, who's not here. Is there any update from that, Mr. Thomas? Would there be anything you'd like to share?
Not at the moment, no.
Okay,
have any
that's
update.
great. That takes us to staff reports, the appointment of auditor for 2022 audited financial statements. Ms. Klassen.
Today in front of you, you have a recommendation to appoint the BDO Canada LLP as our District of Clearwater External Auditors for 2022 financial year. The audit is required as per the legislation. They perform an interim audit as well as a full audit in May. This year, there's some new standards that they need to follow to do with risk. So they'll be doing additional detail work with their IT systems. And when they look at risk, they'll look at the reasonable chance that it's a possibility of it being more material. So they're doing more work. The budget for 2021 was about 26,000. They quoted about 24. I'm thinking it's going to come in 5,000 for 2022. And they quoted us for 2022 to be 26,000.
Great. Councillor, are there any questions for Ms. Klassen at this time? Councillor Haring?
To confirm, we've been pretty happy with BDO and their audits in the past. They've worked closely with staff, so there's no reason not to go with BDO as far as I can tell. Yeah.
And just to follow up on that question, it has been 11 years now. What would be at the normal cycle where a council might consider reviewing or looking at different options?
We would put it out to tender. If a normal cycle could be, it really depends. Every time you change an auditor, it does take a little bit of additional time. So I think they're due to put it out to tender again, but not.
Yeah, I know that from the past audited statements, what's been really good is that they have been, as the municipality grows, is that they've been helping us to deepen our knowledge and to really provide some good framework. For me personally, I wouldn't want to make that change right now because the guidance has been strong, and their ability to know us and help us grow, in our structure has been helpful. So we will look to that in maybe a few years' time, see how that goes. Council, there is a recommendation on the table. Somebody would like to make that.
Make that recommendation.
Okay. Maybe you want to read that out for the benefit of those
I
who
can
might
do
be new.
that. So the recommendation that council reappoint BDO Canada LLP as the District of Clearwater external auditor for the 2022 financial year, and that the mayor and chief administrative officer are hereby authorized to execute the necessary documents.
Great. So a motion by Councillor Taylor. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Haring, any discussion on that motion? All those in favor? Motion carries. Thank you very much. That brings us to the Community Emergency Preparedness Fund grant. This is a staff report. Who would like to speak to that? Oh, Mr. Smith in the house.
Thank you, Acting Mayor Sim. So the staff report here is for UBCM's Community Emergency Preparedness Fund. They're going to fund up to $30,000, 100% dollars for fire department equipment or training training. Some of the items that the fire department's looking at for in this one are the 2.5-inch quick attack monitor. So this will allow essentially one firefighter to deploy a large amount of water and set it up and kind of like a set and forget kind of thing. So you can stay there and be there to protect an exposure, something like that. So usually with a 2.5-inch hand line, it's like 2 to 3 firefighters. So this is just the man or the person power rescue mannequin. So we have one right now. It's older style, hard plastic. It's got pinch points and stuff like that. Live fire training props. This may be one that doesn't get covered because I got some preliminary pricing and it's the cheapest one is more than the grant. So that's why we kind of added a bunch of things to this. The grant needs to be submitted by this Friday. So once we get the numbers and stuff like that, we'll figure out which ones we want to go for. And then was another thought was 12 more radios to get rid of some older ones. So like it says in there, 2002 was our newer stuff. So our oldest stuff, sorry.
Great. Council, are there any questions for Mr. Smith? Councillor Frizzle.
So you're saying the live training props, you're likely not going to get because of cost?
Essentially, yeah. So for example, the dumpster prop was just the dumpster prop was $20,000. Yeah, that's exactly it. So we're looking at ways to make it like, because these are built by a company and they're safety certified and all that. That's the whole idea why the costs are quite up there. The car fire was about $33,000 and it just adds on, right? So we're looking at other ways to make it more economically feasible and still be safe as well, right? So we're just looking at other options for that. So, but we would like to do that. Maybe that's the next granting cycle, or finding a different way to make the prop safe by getting a gas fitter to build the, because these use gas like propane for the fire, and so it's no, there's no wood, there's no chemicals, there's none of that plastics and stuff like that. So and they're controlled by a switch. So that's why the cost goes up, right? Fire department training cost goes up. So there is a couple smaller type props, like the extinguisher one, and they have a live fire simulator. So it's basically a big screen like that TV, and it looks like fire. So you put it in a smoky building, and you can attack it with like a digital fire nozzle or water. So there's that option. I think that was about $20,000. So yeah, stuff's not cheap.
Not cheap.
And it's safer. There's no carcinogens. We can do it basically any time of the year, right? When there's a burning ban on, we can use those. So
Any other questions? So my question is being that you just had a car fire, so that was good. Is the fact that, you know, obviously the training's really required. Is there room in this grant that you could actually sort of, you know, pinpoint those funds and then acknowledge that there would be a savings towards them? Or is it that you actually have to expend it? So it couldn't be like 50-cent dollars that we could possibly top out of reserves or anything like that?
we could add to it, right? Yeah, this is just, they're just saying you can have 30,000, 100%. You don't have to put anything to it, but if there was a way to look at saying, yeah, we want to buy this one prop, we're gonna pay the rest, that would be.
Right. So if I understand the motion, it's basically that these types of props
These
and how
types
it
of props.
translates will be included in the
it's-
grant.
And, yeah, and like I mentioned in the report was live fire training is the most difficult training to do because it takes time to set up and have somewhere to do it safely and properly. And it's the most beneficial by far for everyone to actually see the fire, put it out, right? Because we can simulate fire on a desk and desktop stuff all the time, but the realism of actual fire is what is worthwhile, right? It's invaluable. So
I think if we look back to some of the things that you and your team have had to go up against, it's definitely needed, necessary. And I would think that it would be an excellent recruitment tool, is the fact that it could give people a bit more security that when they face those things that they've had that training. So I think this is a great thing. And I think that we can continue to be grateful for the work that you do. And you always apply such a conscientious lens to bolstering the fire department. So thank you. Council, there is a motion. If anybody would like to extend that, I see Councillor Taylor.
Yep, I can make that motion. So the recommendation that council support the submission of an application to the UBCM Community Emergency Preparedness Fund for the Volunteer and Composite Fire Departments Equipment and Training 2022 stream and an amount of up to $30,000, and that the district staff will provide the overall management of the grant.
Great. Any discussion? No, I think we're all in agreement. This is terrific. So all in favor? Great, thank you very much. Fire Underwriters Survey Update Staff Report.
So I'll speak to that one as well. So with where this come from was our fire engine was due to be replaced next year. Speaking with fire underwriters, they have a document where you can ask for an extension to the apparatus age for probably up to 5 years.
Oh, that's awesome.
On the report, there's a table. So table 1, medium-sized cities is where we had assumed Clearwater fit into because of the size and the population density. Speaking with the fire underwriters, they classify us medium and small. So something you have to have a discussion with them apparently. So we have 20 years to be able to replace our engine now. So like 5-year extension, or 5 years longer than we originally thought. So what I wanted to do with this report was information to council that that's where we're classified as, is between a medium and small community. We have 20-year timeline for our first responding engine. So.
Okay, that's excellent. Any questions? Councillor Haring?
More of just a comment than a question, but this is awesome to get now because it helps us. I mean, it sounds like a long way off, but if we start planning now, then it's not going to be, 5 years from now and we're looking at a tax rise. This is something we can build into our plan. And I know we've been doing that all along, but it's nice to get the update and give us a little more time to figure out what's next. So thanks.
Yeah, thanks for taking the initiative on that. And I believe that that's just for information. And then we have some upcoming grant applications. Another staff report on that. We're on page 49 to 52, if you're following along.
Thank you, Acting Mayor and Council. So yes, this report is for information purposes, outlining some of the grants that we will be applying for between now and the December 31st cutoff. We have targeted 9 grants in particular, one of which we've already heard from the fire department for. And then the other 8 are listed on the chart. I think the other interesting thing about these grants is that they are crossing 4 different departments. And so that's really sort of helping move the work plans forward when we can find grants that sort of marry the activities that we're looking to do for the next calendar year. But if there are any questions at this time?
Questions? Just while council takes a look at that, I'm curious about the Enabling the Accessibility Fund. Clearwater had done a UNBC mobility study a few years ago, and results of that study manifested in the 25 mobility parking spots at Philo. And otherwise, but there was a great effort on that. What would be some of the proposed uses that you see out of that grant?
That one we're still gathering some details for. So quite frankly, we haven't sort of finalized what the wish list is for that yet. Still gathering some details from parks and facilities. And we've been doing some reach out. We have the business walk happening tomorrow. So I'm hoping that there'll be some ideas percolating. So by the end of the week, we should have a formal list of what will be included on that grant.
Right. And since we don't have Mr. Mayor in attendance now, but I am wondering, because I think Councillor Frizzle, you've spoken about the accessibility into Centennial Hall. So I don't know if that's been popped up on your radar for that as well, especially with the new studio there, and just that area has never been very friendly.
That area has always been a problem for especially seniors right now, are the sit and be fit classes there. A lot of people aren't attending because of the stairs. If there was a ramp of any kind there, it might be something to consider, because that would make it much more accessible and much more opportunity.
Yeah, that is fantastic information. I appreciate you bringing forward. No, that hadn't sort of percolated to the top for me, so that's new, and I will definitely be following up with that, because that type of accessibility is actually applicable to a couple of these grants. So we should be able to find some way of including that. And I'll follow up with Roger Mayer about that.
Yeah, and I think as long as you were chatting to him, I would be interested to see if there would be any appetite to have a handrail that goes down the walkway to the beach. Sometimes that is quite a slippery surface, and for people who've got those mobility issues, it's difficult. The swimming is fantastic for mobility, but it is just getting down there just because of the grade that's quite tricky. And it's been really good when we've had the benches down there, and I think that there's lots of room down there that if he felt it was appropriate to include there. Also, that brings to the New Horizons for Seniors. Any thoughts on what that was going to include?
Yeah, that one, we're hoping to actually partner that one up with, I believe it's that one. Yes, the New Horizons. For the second floor assessment on the Sportsplex, including sort of the assessment, the study and design. This might be one of those grants. Well, it is a grant that that we can use towards that assessment. It won't be enough for the total assessment, so we do need to marry that with another one of these grants, and that should get us mostly there in terms of costs. So we might still be looking for additional grant funding. But the intent right now is to use that towards the assessment.
Yep. Yeah, Councillor Frizzle.
Just on top of that, talking second floor of Sportsplex, the accessibility fund would be a good place to look to make sure that people can access it easily, not just stairs. Because there's a lot of seniors in this town that will not go anywhere near that if they can't get up there easily.
Councillor Haring.
Yeah, and I added to that, I wonder if there's not some opportunity for fitness and exercise equipment to contribute to accessibility as well. Because I mean, it's about keeping injuries, you know, treatable and small while we can as well. So that might be an opportunity as well.
Yeah, and it's really great that you're looking to kind of marry some of these opportunities together, like even the building economic development capacity to, you know, do that seed money. And I see that certainly is that second floor addition, and possibly, I don't know if you've touched base with Wellsgrave Community Forest lately on anything that they've got.
Yeah, no, I haven't over the summer. I have talked to them last spring, but I haven't recently. So that'll be an area to follow up with.
Yeah, noting the November deadline. Yeah, who knows what they come up with. That's a very innovative table. Councillor Mackenzie.
Yeah, I'd just like to thank you for your work searching these different grant opportunities out, and it's refreshing to see all 100% grants as well for funding. Just looking at the deadlines, is this within capacity to complete everything? I know I see some due within the next week and a half or so, a couple later on, but it's within capacity to apply for all these?
It'll be tight, but it's within capacity.
Awesome. Perfect. Thank you.
That raises another question. What if you're successful in all of them?
Wouldn't that be awesome?
Yeah, it would, but I don't want to sit around this table and say staff capacity, we can't do it. So do you feel comfortable that, you know, success will, you know, keep you busy, but not too busy?
Yes, and of course, these aren't all the projects that we'll have for next year. But
Yeah.
I think the benefit is that because these are across multiple departments,
Great.
you know, that it will help those specific departments move things forward, but it's not going to be everything for one department. So
I'm glad to hear that.
So yeah, so it should be doable.
Okay, good. Glad to hear that. Great. Are there any other questions? Oh, Councillor Taylor.
Not a question, just a comment that, you know, this is up to $410,000 worth of grant funding. So, I mean, that's, I'm sure Ms. Klassen could correct me on my math, but it's probably around 15% equivalent in taxes. So, so great to see us kind of going after these opportunities. So thank you.
Yeah, no, that's great. Okay, so I think that this was just for information. So may the force be with you, with your writing pen and your articulate version. Yes, 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 yes. Thesaurus is our best friend. This brings us to a very meaty topic, the council procedure bylaw. Go team. What have we got? Just before you start, Mr. Thomas, is there anything that you would like to share on this?
It's more of a question. Does council want to discuss this in committee of the whole? To have some more freedom rather than structured discussion?
Well, that is an excellent suggestion. I would, are you thinking under the government standing? Where would you like to put that?
It could be on the government operations, but council can also pass a motion to go into committee of the whole at any time.
What is the will of council? Oh, you have a question.
Yep.
Just wave our wand and then we're a committee of the whole. Nobody has to move their chair either. Okay, so I need a motion. Just committee of the whole. Great. Do I have a seconder? Great. Do I have any discussion on that course of action? All in favor? Motion carries. Okay, Councillor Haring.
So my take on this is I'd kind of like to see this slowed a bit and incorporate the new council. I do think that I don't like the idea of moving public input to the start of the meeting. Just because if we haven't had a chance to have the discussion, how does the public know where we sit, right? And what their comment might be. So I think I'd like to see that be kind of at the end of the meeting still. The other thing is the timing. I think it would just be good. We've got 2 new councillors. Let's see how the schedule works for them. I think as Councillor Mackenzie has mentioned and myself, sure, like evening meetings would be better for us, but I'd rather see us wait for the new council and see that it works for the whole group.
Mr. Thomas, can you maybe highlight some of the changes that you have made to this document?
Would be quite a long list.
Yes, it would.
It's pretty extensive review of the procedure bylaw. The original procedure bylaw was adopted in 2014 and has since had 4 revisions. 1 in 2015, 1 in 2017, 1 in 2018, and the most recent one is in 2021. Over the last year of serving as the CAO, I've noticed some areas that we could strengthen in the procedure bylaw in the way council and the District of Clearwater, for that matter, operates. So would council like me to walk you through provision by provision or section by section?
I think, well, council, what do you guys think? There's like a lot of additions here. So there's 2 things on that. One is, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the council procedure bylaw kind of seems like this is the playbook for council.
It is.
Is how it operates. So when I went through this, my observation was that it's grown from a 26-page document to a 42-page document. So a lot more additions for definitions. There's a lot more sort of inclusions. There's been some things that have been taken out. And there's probably a lot of rationale for it. When we started down this pathway of the council procedure bylaw, it was really to address from our community that they felt that an evening meeting would allow for more public participation. The pros and cons with that are we can go back to the old playbook and said, well, we did that before. We still didn't get a lot of people. We echoed that, the fact that one of the largest things that council does is pass a big budget and 3 to 4 people show up. So it was how to get people more engaged. The pros to it is the fact that people are asking. So just because it didn't work doesn't mean it's not going to work. And I think that public accountability, and that's one thing that we really heard in this last election, is how to be accountable. So while that set us down the path, I think that Mr. Thomas, then once you got into it, you went, oh, look here, we can do this and we can do that. And as you said, take all of your year's observations and put it into the document. But they're vast of what's been included. So council, is that something we want to go through, bit by bit? Is it, is it something that you want to actually say, you know what, we've gone down this, but we want to engage the next council? What would be council's thoughts? Councillor Mackenzie.
Well, I agree with Councillor Haring, and I think we should include everyone in this conversation personally. Not just because it works for myself, himself. I think all 6 should be around here before any real decisions are made on that.
Councillor Frizzle.
I'm a little apprehensive that I know there's the one thing, the 6:30 time, and that's fine. But to have the new ones come in and try and figure out how the procedure bylaw is going to work when they've never had anything to do with it before could be a little bit more cumbersome than, they haven't been in a meeting before. They don't understand a lot that's happening. So I don't know if that they would have a lot of input for the majority of that. For some of it, yes. So I'm like this.
Oh, it's for you. Councillor Taylor.
obviously it's a bigger document, a lot changing. And I think I mean, I have no skin in the game after the next meeting. But my recommendation would be that like everybody take this away and read through like detail, like every single item and say, yeah, does this make sense to me? Do I feel comfortable with this? You know, maybe there's an element of like, if we think the biggest change for the actual councillors coming in is the time, then maybe that could be something that could be discussed, but then, as you say, not necessarily have them vet every aspect of the council procedure bylaw. Or do it like, yeah, I don't know. It almost needs a workshop. It's so big.
Well, and I think that does clarify it. I think that we can take this opportunity as the council of the whole to maybe go through some of the items to maybe hear some of the rationale about why that things have been added and you know how that goes, and then let's have that discussion and then let's decide where we land. Because as I said, it's stretched into a much larger document, and there's new things in here that we, you know, we maybe didn't notice last time, and perhaps some of us have made notes on things throughout the document. And Mr. Thomas, it would be great to hear. So how does everybody want to go through it, page by page, or how do you want to go? Page by page. All right.
When I started the research into this bylaw, I was looking at a number of examples across the province because quite a few municipalities have actually undertaken the work of updating the procedure bylaw. With the pandemic, there were some legislative changes implemented as a result in the community charter and actually the local government act as well. And so we needed to update several provisions of the current procedure bylaw to catch up to our current legislative requirement. I also noticed when we were doing some research here that the current procedure bylaw doesn't speak to a lot of the existing expectations in the Local Government Act and the Community Charter that are relevant. And instead, what I observed as a staff member, when there is a question of procedure or governance, we had to consult not just the council procedure bylaw, but consult Community Charter, Local Government Act, policies, and a whole host of other pieces. And so the frame of mind that I took with developing this draft document was to bring everything in one document as much as possible. That we will see on a day-to-day operations of the District of Clearwater, instead of having to check multiple sources to confirm if something was true or not. So looking at the definition section, we're highlighting the alternative approval process. That's an option already existing in law for municipalities. We're defining administration, which is, I think, existing here. So I'm not sure that there is any substantive changes to the first page, which is on 57.
So just as long as we're on page 4, the advisory body that you've got on the bottom of page 4, it was previously in section 2.1. Is that
of the existing bylaw?
Yeah. So this is just strictly a definition change? Is that sort of the goal there? Which is fine.
2.1. Means an advisory committee appointed by council for the purpose of providing. So the existing bylaw says the advisory body provides advice to the committee. In fact, the advisory body provides advice to council. The advisory body is the committee. So that definition would not hold true.
And what would be an example of an advisory body?
Any of the select committees existing for the District of Clearwater at the moment. So Trails Task Force, the way it's supposed to function is the committee considers the topic, referred to it by council, provides recommendation back to council, and only council can authorize the execution of that recommendation.
So in your eye, the advisory body would never refer to like the Parks and Recreation or something. It would always go directly to council and then council would direct it to
That's correct.
back to the committee. Or back to like the Parks and Recreation. Let's get it. Go.
It would. Parks and Recreation Committee of
Okay.
Council is an
That's how you-
advisory body.
Okay, but you've used the example of the Trails Task Force Committee, so that's why I'm confused.
So any committees created by the District of Clearwater
Mhm.
is an advisory body. The difference between select and standing is the way the district set up standing committees is only of members of council, which is the equivalent of a committee of the whole that we're having right now.
Okay.
And so whenever a committee makes a recommendation, it actually gets put on the next agenda of council for actioning by council. It's a separate entity.
Okay. I think that's a really good differentiation. Thank you. Any other questions on that? Okay. All right, keep going.
Page 2, I'd like to highlight the CAO workshop.
Mhm.
In the past, the way CAO workshop function did not explicitly meet the requirements of the community charter. And this is something I've researched, and in the context of government and certainly local governments, it's always prudent to take the cautious approach rather than risking a scenario where the decisions made can be called into question and would be set aside. It all comes down to the risk tolerance of the District of Clearwater. So here, the CAO workshop is also distinct from the council workshop, and the council workshop is a separate meeting, basically a committee of a whole style. Council convenes a meeting because once council, this ties into the definition of what a council meeting is. And that one, I specifically got a legal opinion on. I didn't want to say that out loud, but I specifically got a legal opinion on because I needed to understand what are the mechanics that creates a council meeting establishing. And those 4 conditions are what came back as the mechanics that create a council meeting. And the reason that's important is because, for example, let's say we were hosting a dinner to recognize doctors and all members of council are there. Does that create a council meeting? Was a question that has arisen in this organization since I've been here as an example. And it's very important for council and staff to be able to respond to those questions to say, no, it's not a council meeting because of X, Y, Z.
So in that example, how would you define it then? So
A council meeting?
no, if there's a recognition dinner and all council is there, then how do you define that? Because that's a good question.
That would be a business function of the District of Clearwater
Okay.
because of this definition being clarified here.
Which definition is that? Because I'm on CAO workshop.
On page 5, council meeting.
Oh, okay, so you're jumping ahead.
No, you're on the same page, lower down.
Okay.
What I'm saying is the CAO workshop, the council workshop, and the council meeting definition are all related.
Okay.
By this definition, we were in the midst of that business.
Exactly.
Go, okay, we have to go. They're asking us something, we want a decision or something.
Mhm.
Then the discussion stops there, we call a public.
Exactly. Because that would meet the requirement of the community charter. For example, if none of those actions occurred and the meeting started traversing into the discussion started traversing into what will be a meeting, and someone overheard that and came to the public session and challenged council on that, the decisions will be set aside.
And so with that, bringing on board new council members, there's generally a lot of orientation. Where would that fall under a definition?
The orientation would fall under a council workshop. However, there will be, under section 90 of the community charter, various elements that is allowable to close the meeting to the public. So you can still have the effect of having a closed discussion, meeting the requirements of the community charter, because the purpose of the orientation is to discuss business that will meet the definition of a council meeting.
Is everybody clear about how a council workshop would be called and still be transparent? Okay. Moving on.
On page number 6, electronic participation and stuff as a result of the pandemic changes, the changes made to the community charter and LGA as a result of the pandemic. The corporation, officers of the corporation, I'm specifying what the officers are of the corporation. This is within the community charter, and it's important to clarify who the officers are and are not.
Is that officers or just officer?
Each singular one will be an officer. Taken together, it will be officers, but singular, each position will be an officer.
Okay. Moves us forward.
Page 7, sorry, public notice post in place. We have a designated board at the front of the office, which is not clearly demarcated. The idea is to, if this is implemented, we will be putting signage around the specific section of that board that is for District of Clearwater public notice posting place. We also have a space on our website for public notices as well, and this is meant to capture the reality that we do use digital and analog platforms.
Okay. The one that didn't make it over from the past version was the select committees. Is
Okay. So the select committee will fall under the definition committee. I did not distinguish in the definition section whether it's select or standing, whereas within the document itself, we did break down select and standing committee distinctions.
okay.
We generalize it to bring it high level in the definitions here.
Any questions? That's part 1. Any questions on that? Okay. Moving to part 2.
Okay.
Did much change here?
These are standard language for the applicability of the rules of procedure for local government.
Okay. 2.3, suspension of the rules.
2.3, sorry, 2.3, or do you want to talk 2.2?
I can talk 2.2. Everybody else? I didn't see that there was a lot of changes in there.
Okay.
Did you? What did you change? I didn't see anything. So, but what do you got highlighted?
I was just wanted to point to 2.2.2, which is in matters not addressed in this bylaw, council may at its discretion determine the appropriate rules of procedure on that particular item, or follow the Robert's Rules of Order. There is also a Benoit Rules of Order, I believe, which is a separate, it's an alternative form of governing meetings than Robert's Rules of Order, but we kept it the same because that's what the district has. 2.4 speaks to 2.2.4 speaks to the way committees, commissions, etc. will operate. Keep in mind that all commissions created by the District of Clearwater is again an advisory body in some form to the District of Clearwater. And this basically says, unless it's specified in this bylaw, they will operate in accordance with the terms of reference approved by council for that committee or commission. Suspension of the rule, 2.3.
This is new.
Yes, so at any time, but this is new in terms of writing it into a bylaw, but it has always existed in terms of council power and authority.
Yeah, and the point being is if you're comparing them, is that
Yeah.
we haven't actually done the comparison, and so to get the rationale for it,
I see.
right? And it is the council playbook, as we've decided. So I think it's important to highlight what's now been put in, give the rationale for it, and then expand.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So at any time during a meeting of council, council may resolve in respect of a matter or matters on the agenda that the rules are suspended with respect to procedure, in which case the following shall apply. The number of times a member of council may speak on any matter is not limited, or a member of the public may be invited by the presiding member to speak on a matter before council. So an example where that would be relevant is, let's say council had already discussed the matter on the agenda, someone new entered the public sphere, council wanted to have a discussion about something else that is timely. Instead of referring that to the next meeting, because the adoption of the agenda had already occurred, the discussion on the topic had already occurred, council can suspend the rules temporarily to consider that matter on a case-by-case basis. It's meant to be used on a rare and necessary basis, but it's an option that's available to council.
I really like this one. I mean, I guess that makes sense with my style, but for me, I just think that a lot of the time, having frank discussions and open discussions with the public is how we advance, you know. And I think like the Robert's Rules of Order are great in terms of keeping us on task and focused, but sometimes the discussion is worth having because it moves the mark on where we're going to land, right? And so I think this is a key thing to include, and I like having some sort of guards around it, right? Like this is when it'll happen and how. I think this is a really nice change.
And it also lays out, let's say a member of council recognized something, but our current procedure bylaw doesn't speak to it. And the question to staff is, how do we do this? We can point to section 2.2.2 and say, council, you do have the option to temporarily suspend the rules, which gives the presiding member and council the opportunity to be more flexible than the structures of the procedure.
And just to apply an example, and so just to make sure I've understood this correctly. So if we are discussing forestry tenure or something, and the manager of Wellsbury Community Forest happens to walk in, we're able to suspend and then ask for that expertise to assist with the conversation.
That's correct.
Okay. Okay. Designation of acting mayor.
Another important point is this bylaw prescribes that the rule 2.3.2, the rules governing council meeting are hereby suspended when council is gathered for the purpose of a council workshop, which means the stricture of having to go through the order of procedure of the council agenda, you don't have to worry about that. You open the council meeting, a motion is put to suspend the rules. It's already suspended based on the procedure bylaw if it's adopted, and council has the freedom to discuss things a bit more openly than you would otherwise. Because once a council meeting convenes, the order of the agenda is what council has to follow.
Right. And so, okay, so that just applies to, okay. Okay. Any other questions on that? Go.
Are you saying that we could, in the middle of the meeting, go into a council workshop?
We just did.
I thought we made it to the committee of the whole.
It is a committee of the whole, yes.
Okay.
Different terminologies mean different things. This is giving you more flexibility.
I can see a party game being developed out of this.
2.4, section designation of acting mayor is something that we do on a regular basis. I don't remember if it's specified in the current procedure bylaw, whether it's on December 31st, but on or before December 31st, we have to do as staff a number of things. We have to post a schedule for council meetings for the following year. We're trying to align a lot of the, I guess, routine procedural items to be at the same timeline. So it's not on the 21st for one, on the 18th for the other, or the 1st for the other. It's all the same timeline. With respect on page 9 of the document, we provide a bit more clarity here. If both the mayor and designated acting mayor are absent or otherwise unavailable to act, someone could get sick, as an example, last minute, and anything could happen. The councillor who is next in line to serve as acting mayor shall become acting mayor for the purposes of fulfilling those specific requirements at that time. And 2.4.5, in the event the office of mayor becomes vacant, which could happen at any point, the council may designate a member to serve as acting mayor on an interim basis, who shall continue to serve in the office until such time as another mayor is elected or otherwise appointed. Again, this is something that council already has the authority to do through the community charter, and I'm just embedding that in the procedure bylaw to clarify process.
And so 2.5.2, further, the authority to preserve order includes the authority to exclude or expel a person from a meeting. So does person need to be defined, or is it best to leave open? Because person is that public person, or is that council person, staff person, or would it apply to all?
I believe it applies to all.
It's covered in 2.7 in the code of conduct.
That's why I'm just checking, yeah.
Spells out who the person would be, because it applies to all, but differently between members of council and members of the public.
It does. That's why I didn't know if it needed to be or referred to that particular section, right?
So the presiding member has the responsibility in law to preserve the order of the council meeting. And they can ask staff or a member of council to step out of the meeting and for sure a member of the public.
And I think what's important there is to preserve order.
That's correct.
But we don't have a definition of what order is, do we?
We do. No, we
No, we
do
don't.
not. No. And I don't see one in the previous one as well. Do you want us to look at adding a definition for order?
Well, because this is new, from my standpoint, order then can become a very ambiguous term. My idea of order is very different than my son's version of order in his bedroom. So does it need definition or not? But if you take it in its best intent, I think we all understand it. Council, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think the definition in 2.7.2 could be just kind of flushed out explicitly. That seems like my definition of order anyways.
I mean, the concern is that, I mean, I think back to when we had a bylaw, or there was an information session on whether or not sea cans should be, permitted in the district. And we've also had a noise bylaw, and the meeting, it was heightened energy in the room. Did that mean there was an order, or was that just the nature of what, a public gathering includes? So I don't know. If we're going to be clear and if we're going to get some specifics, that may be something that would be worth having.
To me, all those things are within the bounds as long as they don't disrupt, disturb, or in any way cause the delay of council business. right? To me, somebody, heatedly expressing their opinion
Yep.
about something is welcome, but if it's to the point where they're, say, yelling over the
Mhm.
next person who's speaking at a public forum or something like that, well, then it's a different story. You're disrupting the flow of the meeting, right?
Okay.
Because I think that we have to allow, I oddly think of Trailer Park Boys and the guy saying, I can't defend myself without swearing and smokes, right? Like, but that is a component of our community. Not everyone expresses himself the same way. So I hesitate to put really strict limits on it. Like I think about language and stuff like that. Some people are incapable of expressing themselves without some of that language that for the rest of us might be offensive.
And that is exactly why the definition of order, I'm wondering, because that particular articulation is what comes forward, but is it grounds to be removed, right?
Mhm.
So I'm not comfortable having that necessarily open that way. So
Mhm.
it depends on who the presiding member is and what that means.
Yeah,
That's just a different way to look at it.
absolutely. Yeah.
Another, maybe a compromise could include a revision of the steps that has to occur before before someone could be removed. Because the way I envisioned this as I was doing the research and drafting some of the language here is, if someone is being disruptive in a meeting, the presiding member has a responsibility to call that person to order.
Okay.
And if they comply, the issue goes away. If they refuse and the behavior that required the calling to order continues, then I think the threshold is met for your delaying council business, you being disruptive, which will mean the option to expel them is on the table.
And just on that, we are sort of in this committee of the whole. I'm looking at the staff. Are you comfortable having them stay? I'm so worried about keeping their time.
I think it's also important that they stay because
Okay.
later on they're going to be the ones helping us implement the procedure.
Okay. No, I just wanted to check being sensitive. Okay.
I think we covered 2.5, 2.6. Earlier this year, when we were looking at the financial plan bylaw for 2021, sorry, we noticed that there was a typo, and the question of whether or not the district had the legislative authority to spend some of those funds because we made an incorrect reference to the wrong fiscal year. We had a discussion of looking at the legislation, doing some research that would enable the District of Clearwater to make non-substantial amendments to bylaws that were glaring grammatical errors or typographical errors. And so this provision was lifted directly from a regulation from the province that enables municipality to do just that. So this is already codified in law.
This one is a big addition to it. And it's the one I know the least about.
Okay.
That's for sure. And for me, because it's invoking bylaws, this is one of the areas that I almost need to see it. Here's what it was. Here's an example of what it would look like, and here's how it could translate out.
Right.
Right, for me personally, my comfort level is when I read some of this, I'm worried that by omitting and providing for its repeal, I might muck us up in the future if I agree without understanding it and seeing it how it works, and also sort of seeing that legislation and where it applies. I went through a number of other communities and I didn't see anything like this. Maybe it was written a different way. As I said, it's my weakest area, but that's where I've got that's my sensitivity to it. Councillor Haring.
So to clarify, you said this is already standing law. Like even if we made a different policy, that we still have to do all this.
Section 2.6.1 is all codified in law. Section 262 to 266 is our attempt to put in processes that includes transparency to council so that you are actually driving when those proposed things take effect, rather than a staff making those changes unilaterally.
Councillor Frizzle?
So on the 2.61,
Yes,
these can all be done, but they have to come before us before they can go forward.
that's
That-
correct.
That's not something that staff can just change and be done with.
That's correct.
Right, but let's take this example, right? Is that what I struggle with is not having the before and after. So for example, this document, you know, I had to print off what it was and then to compare to. So there wasn't the highlighting of what's being adjusted, and not to get into the minutia, but you know, it was something to find, you know, that there's been a lot of work put into it. You were perhaps a bit humble and maybe didn't say, oh, by the way, I've, you know, increased the definitions, but I would need to see the before and after. Otherwise, I'm unclear. But that's just me. But that's once in, what are we correcting and what's, you know, is there something that might be important? Councillor Taylor? Yeah, often even highlighted in yellow that this would be omitted or something like what are we doing that's comparing it? I mean, you know the volume of paper work that's done. But when just to see what the before and after and just to make sure what we're actually amending. Councillor Haring, thoughts?
My understanding of that was that, like, what we're doing right now would be an example of that, right? Like, we were brought these bylaws, we examined them at the meeting at the time of, usually along with the staff report that would outline what's changing and why.
But we didn't get that.
And I think
That's-
that's the part that Councillor, our acting mayor Sim is saying is missing.
It's just the comparison, right? It's here's what we're suggesting is that without the comparison, because let's say, oh my gosh, we forgot to mention that we have to be clothed during meetings, right? Like, you know, just something. I know. But something like that. It's just a way to compare so that we're able to reflect in a different way.
You're saying, like, say, using this as an example, there should have been highlights in here of all the changes.
For me,
Yeah,
the
no,
way
that's
I
what you're-
read things, I would have liked it new and then it would have drawn the attention, right?
Yeah.
But we were presented a new bylaw, and if we were to, that's why for me, the revisions and the consolidation, if we're going to work on that, when it's brought to council, we see where the revisions and the consolidation are. And so again, it's because if we see that, then I'm really happy with 2.6. But I don't know if we have to document that would be part of our playbook or not. Do you see it there? Am I confused? Yeah.
I think further in the bylaw, it distinguished the types of updates to council. And I believe I wrote in here that if there is an expectation for council to make a decision, it has to be accompanied by a written report. And if it's an informational update, it can be a verbal update. Would that meet the requirement expressed?
Well, I don't know if it's a requirement. It's just the way I see things. So I'm just one voice. I mean, I got a team here, right? That's the one thing that I just feel I need more work on to show examples of how it does. That's me. So I'm not comfortable for me moving it to second reading because this one is a big addition for me.
I'd like to propose an amendment to that effect then, to what we have here. If we could amend it to include that changes to bylaw will be accompanied by a report identifying clearly the changes which occur from the original version of the bylaw.
Is that something that's appropriate to put into this type of a
Absolutely.
document? Okay. I think that's an important.
Sorry, could you say that again?
It was well said. Hope you can do it again.
I lost it now. No, so that in the case of bylaws, council will receive in this report a clear identification of passages of the bylaw that have been changed in comparison to original passages of the bylaw.
Changed, amended, deleted, or otherwise.
Yeah. It was better the first time.
It was better the first time.
Sorry, guys.
Um,
Haven't figured that out yet.
Yeah, so I think that that's a good one, and I think that that's for everybody's security. You know, a playbook is just to make sure we can all follow back.
Would you be okay if this becomes a new 2.6.2? A new 2.6.2. So it shifts everything down.
Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, you'll keep 6.2. Yeah, okay. I was like, that seems important.
No, it works.
So maybe you can help me understand 2.66. In all circumstances where such a directive is provided, the chief administrative officer shall provide a full report to council at the next regular scheduled meeting. Where does that tie in, explain it, help me. Sure.
Let's start with 262. In
Okay.
order for a revised bylaw to be effective, it shall, which is a requirement, require 3 readings of council. So that will have to come to council anyway. What I'm proposing with the new 2.6, before it comes to council, we have a requirement that a staff report be drafted that identifies the changes as required. So we've identified the changes, we brought to council for 3 readings and adoption. It continues, prior to the bylaw being read a 3rd time, the corporate officer shall certify that the proposed revised bylaw has been revised in accordance with the bylaw authorizing the revision, which would be this bylaw. The corporate officer may make minor amendments to approved minutes. It goes on to, so it talks about bylaw, it talks about minutes, it talks about the things that can be amended effectively under 261. So the corporate officer may make minor amendments to approved minutes to address typographical error, sequencing number error, grammatical error, or completing missing information as long as it does not change the intent of council. So 264 is related to 266. So let's say we missed drafting the in-camera minutes for last meeting, and one of the numbers were off in the resolution. If I made a change to that resolution number, which does not affect the resolution itself, I need to report that to council.
Okay.
265, the action authorized under this section may be made by the corporate officer upon the direction of the CAO. In circumstances where the CAO and corporate officer is the same person, which in case in the District of Clearwater it is, the direction must be provided by the mayor. And so we're separating, how do you have that in financial terms again? Segregation of duties here. And so if the mayor provides me a direction, I may consult the mayor and they say, hey, I'd like to change this minutes because this numbering was off. If the mayor say, yes, go ahead, I am going to report that to council at the next meeting.
Okay.
2.7, code of conduct. So the province has required through legislation that each council, new term of council, I think in the first 6 months, have to consider code of conduct issues and whether it's going to adopt formally a policy. I believe the current procedure bylaw speaks to code of conduct and expectations of members throughout meetings, as well as committee members. Let me see if I can find that. It's item 20 on the current procedure bylaw, which is conduct and debate. So code of conduct is already an expectation within the District of Clearwater. This here is laying out the expectation for members, for people participating in a meeting, particularly members of the public. No member or person attending meeting may disrupt. 273, members, staff, and other persons permitted to address council are prohibited from using rude, offensive language, et cetera, et cetera. This talks about civility.
Just for
Councillor Taylor?
clarification on that. So it's, so for 2.7.3, I'm reading this in particular, the last part of that sentence where it says, which directly or indirectly reflects negatively upon the public conduct or private character of any person. So, so that last part of that sentence is where this would be considered a breach of the code of conduct.
Right.
So you could use an offensive language as long as it wasn't directed at the character of a person.
Because at that point, it traverses into defamation and libel.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
the District of Clearwater will be, in effect, facilitating the forum by which that is happening.
Yeah.
I remember a scenario where a municipality in northern BC had a public forum that was recorded, and some very interesting things were said on that public forum, and it was put on the district website, and there was some serious flack for the district being viewed as the vehicle by which this information is being spread in the world. And they actually had to revisit that decision altogether.
The reason I raised it was just kind of in reference to, you know, people might have passionate, colorful language, but as long as it's not directed at an individual person, like in this way, as this describes. So I just wanted to make sure that that last kind of caveat, I guess, in this sentence is really the crux of when this becomes rude or offensive. And then one other, so supplemental to 2.7.4, do we have a peace officer?
A peace officer? I think, yes, as a bylaw enforcement officer, we had to designate Mike as a peace officer, but every police officer is also simultaneously designated as a peace officer. So, for example, there are panic buttons throughout the District of Clearwater. If a member of council so requested to have the presence of a police officer, they would be enabled to implement that bylaw at the request of council.
So we don't need to have somebody here at all times, but somebody could be called if somebody needs to be removed.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Quote Ted Lasso, no fruity language directed at someone.
And the requisition of a peace officer can only occur after the person has refused a directive from the presiding member.
So that comes to 2.7.5. So the member of council, that could be me and Bill. You come to mind. Yes. I needed company. Resist or refuse to obey an order of the presiding member to leave a meeting. But where do we tie that into the rationale? Is it just under code of conduct? Like, does that need to be specified? If it's left on its own, that's a wide berth.
Yep.
And I would personally, I would want to see that tightened up.
Okay.
You know, we've had reports from other councils across the province, and you know, people use the gavel in weird ways, which is not intended. But there cannot just be, I'm asking you to leave. It's not enough. It's got to be tied to a code of conduct.
I think that's a fair point. Every member of council is entitled to sit in their seat unless for some reason, and I think that reason would be code of conduct. Not a difference in opinion or politics. That is not a grounds to remove a member of council.
Well, and that's it. And that's where it gets really dubious, right? So I think that's really good if we can flesh that one out.
Sure.
And then we've got in the event of a satisfactory apology being made by the offending member. But again, I think we have to tie into, you know, that's a code of conduct. It's,
Yep.
right? Like, why are they doing so?
What does a satisfactory apology mean?
So it's to council, not to the presiding member. So the presiding member has duties to oversee the governing of the meeting. However, each member of council, if they disagree with the presiding officer, can appeal to council, who can override the presiding officer's decision.
Yeah, so to me, this means that essentially there's a vote by council. Somebody says, well, I'm sorry, I'd like to come back. And then council can vote on whether or not that person comes back, would be my interpretation of that.
I think if we look to contentious councils where, you know, emotions are flamed and, you know, they've crossed the border, it does require the apology and then the assent. You can, you know, come back to the table. It is a privilege to sit at the table and to keep that. Looking at you. Okay, so we're gonna add some language there. We've got the confidentiality. Big one here, the delegation of authority to CEO. This is a new one too.
It's new, but not new. It's new in the procedure bylaw, but it's existing in law. So the CEO has authority for the overall operation of the district, whichever district. We also have a delegation bylaw that already spells out the authority of the delegated authority of the CAO and other officers of the corporation. And so in anticipation of updating other bylaws, we're clarifying what this actually means. I think the biggest addition to this section is 2.8.3, which speaks to a limitation of the CAO's delegated authority for ratification of collective agreement.
I'd like a little more clarification around 2.8.1. That the council hereby delegate the chief administrative officer the power to create administrative policies or directives as it relates to operational areas, including but not limited to human resources, which shall not be inconsistent with any bylaws, resolutions, or policies adopted by council. So what would be an example of that?
Administrative policies. So let's say the district wanted to put in an agreement for credit card usage. We have a master agreement with the credit card issuer, which would be our bank. We have three options of instituting this agreement for holders of the credit card of the District of Clearwater. We can implement a bylaw, which will require 3 readings to adopt, plus adoption, and the same process to amend. We can do a council policy, or we can do an administrative directive of the CAO for how that credit card is to be used. Basically, the CAO drafts a memo to all staff that this is how the credit card is to be used.
So in terms of administrative procedures, is that on our website?
Administrative procedures?
Yeah. I mean, administrative procedures, how does that operate? Because
So administrative procedures are internal documents on how to affect the policy that council has created, how to implement them. So council may establish a standard that when the snow falls more than 3 inches, it needs to be cleared. But the administrative policy or procedure could state that every 2 hours with a snowfall happening, staff needs to be out there monitoring or plowing or doing specific actions.
yeah, so I know at the school board, we went through, the board actually went through all of the administrative procedures and just did a refresh and a revive. I don't know if we've ever had that opportunity. And I also don't know where we even access that. So this raised an interesting gray area for me, is that, you know, it's difficult if we don't know what the administrative procedures are. So this one highlights it, that I don't know. Oh, Ms. Klassen, did you? probably easier.
I was just wondering if you're talking about administrative procedures or administrative policy.
I'm talking procedures, but I would also be interested in where our policies are too. Are we there?
I hate to use this example, but it's
Go
one
team.
that's more forefront of my mind at the moment. COVID vaccine mandate as an example.
Mm-hmm.
I remember the discussion about the jurisdiction. Council wanted to implement a policy for the whole organization, or is this a staff issue that should be dealt under the HR umbrella? And the decision was made to treat it under the HR umbrella. And for several operational reasons, the biggest one being business continuity, we chose to stay in the middle of the lane because losing 10% of our staff was going to have a serious detrimental impact on the organizational ability to perform.
Mm-hmm.
So that's an example of administrative policy under the HR umbrella.
Councillor Haring?
I think for me, this one makes a lot of sense. I really like this because I think there's the council side of thing, which is bylaw essentially, but like our one employee policy, it's the responsibility of the organization to do their pilot or their policy, right? And that's where you folks have a lot more experience, training, understanding than we do. I think there's not much value in having council get granular with that stuff, but I do see your point about having access to it, understanding of where it would store. So that might be a separate conversation, but to me, I think this is critical because I think at the end of the day, how the staff implement the decision is going to be based off human resources, financial resources, all sorts of things that are, set, the Visa card company policy, all that kind of stuff that I'd really rather not hear about on council. But if it comes up as an issue, yeah, we should be able to access it.
Yeah, and I think you've articulated it well. I'm not interested in the granular, but I sure am interested in finding it. And I want to know what it is. And so when I see this, if we don't have access to it, then it seems to be power without it being available.
Well, and the truth is we always have the power. We do have the one employee, like essentially staff reports to us through Mr. Thomas, right? So we would have that ability to ask and poke around, but I agree. It would be nice to find, here's where it's stored. Here's where council accesses. If you have questions, go ahead, kind of thing.
Yeah. So again, for example, bus walk limits at the school district. You can go down into the website. You can find it and you can pull it up. So it really is an excellent resource. We don't have that yet. If this document is a step in developing us as a stronger, bolder, more competent organization as we mature, that to me is the other side of it. Is those policies need to be done. Otherwise, we're just granting authority and not understanding what may be going on. And it's not to develop them, but it's to know about them.
For sure.
What's the great saying? Power tends to corrupt. Absolute power corrupts absolutely, right?
Is there any changes to this area? A requirement to report?
Well, Councillor Mackenzie, anything you want to say on this?
No, just kind of taking everything in here right now. Still reading over some of this.
Councillor Frizzle?
I don't know if it needs to be in here. Well, yeah. If this is, I'm churning here again. But include something into the bylaw that we have the information as required, something like that. If it don't need it. Now let me process.
Okay, Councillor Haring?
I think some of this has to be spelled out, I assume, in the community charter. Is that where it would be found? Or yeah. And so I'm thinking if we can pull something from there just to specify, to like add a sentence, sure, it's just kind of saying, these policies will be kept available, whatever, 24/7 year round or whatever the right wording there is. But, just kind of specifying that there will be access and accountability, which I'm sure is already specified in the community charter and standard operating, right? So there's probably some wording out there to pull.
Councillor Taylor?
add beyond what's been discussed?
Yeah, I think for me is that where I'm not landing correctly is to delegate the chief administrative officer the power to create administrative policies or directives as it relates to operational areas, including but not limited to human resources, which shall not be inconsistent with any bylaws, resolutions, or policies adopted by council. But I don't believe that council actually adopts anything to do with, some of these areas. Is that?
So you're correct. Council does not, with the current proposed language, council wouldn't be overseeing the text or formally adopting or endorsing the text of, I'll use the example of the credit card agreement, right? We have an obligation, a fiduciary obligation as officers of the corporation to look after the interests of the financial for the District of Clearwater. We have an auditor who assess whether or not we did that and reports directly to council on that. And so I agree that there is some thought that needs to be put in for how council would become aware, but the question is how deep into that does council should go?
I would be interested in, to follow up with Councillor Haring, is that, what does the community charter say? I think power is a very strong word. I'm seeing responsibility or something. But we've got so many policies and that we haven't tidied up. We aren't even aware of. I'm not comfortable with the word power. Oh.
I'm just going to read the text, if you
Yeah.
will, from the Community Charter, Section 154.
Okay.
A council may, by bylaw, delegate its powers, duties, and functions, including those specifically established by an enactment, to the extent provided to A, council committee, B, an officer or employee of the municipality, or C, another body established by council. As exceptions, a council may not delegate the following: the making of a bylaw, the power or duty exercisable only by bylaw, a power or duty established by this or any other act that the council gives its approval or consent to, recommendations on, or acceptance of an action, decision, or another matter, a power or duty established by an enactment that the council hears an appeal or reconsider an action, decision, or other matter, a power or duty to terminate the appointment of an officer. This is something I can't even do. For example, unilaterally terminate an officer. I would require the permission of council to do so, which ties back into the importance of defining who those officers are in the procedure bylaw. The power to impose a remedial action requirement under Division 12, which is remedial action requirement of Part 3. Despite subsection 1, a council may only delegate a power or duty to appoint or suspend an officer to its chief administrative officer. So, sorry, let me reread that one. Despite subsection 1, a council may only delegate a power or duty to appoint or suspend an officer to its CAO. So under the delegation bylaw, I would have to assess whether council has already delegated the authority to suspend or appoint, not fire, suspend or appoint an officer. In exercising its powers under subsection 1, a council may establish any terms and conditions it considers appropriate.
Yeah, so I see that there's real influence there under the word delegate, for sure. And again, that addresses the issue of power, which I didn't hear in that summary.
Power was used.
Did I hear it? I missed
several
out?
times.
Oh, texting Owen. All right. Okay, council, thoughts?
For me, the word power is key because the point of this is we're empowering you to act on what we've dictated through bylaw, resolution, and policy, right? And I think some of that action will require structured policy approaches. Some of it will, just be, yeah, like putting something together for the next meeting. But essentially that power, I think, is how you translate the will of council into the will of the organization. And so I think that is a key part of that conversation. I think this delegation within the context of that makes total sense to me. This is us delegating that granular level. We're saying, here's where the line is of what we consider granular. It doesn't mean that we can't consider it, because of course we can pull all of those things back into the council sphere. A good example of that would be when we had the code of conduct around alcohol at public events. What was that one called again? That was near the start of our term last time, right? But that's essentially an organizational policy, but because council was also covered under that organizational policy, it was brought to council. So even though there was the power for Leslie, the CAO at the time, to make that enactment, she realized this one should go back to council. So I think it leaves some room for that, but it certainly allows the CAO to proceed as a manager would, right? Like on the authority of the board, just like here on the authority of council, the manager can take those administrative actions.
Okay.
And that's my impression.
And so where is the counter? Because all of this is designed to keep council accountable. You don't see this document as keeping council accountable to a code of, or like the rules?
I see this document as spelling out who does what, when, and how.
Okay. Okay. All right. Well, for me, on this particular one, the only thing that concerns me is if we were to ever have anybody that came in and, was somewhat maniacal and overtook this, is where's the counterpoint? Is because it says it, and maybe I'm overthinking it, but there's a lot of changing behaviors out there.
My understanding of that is if, let's say somebody whatever, the policy was implemented and it's unfair, then council could look at it at that point. And even if the CAO had the authority to draft that policy, we can adjust that policy from the council table at any time. Even
as we know that the policy's been created, but this is saying.
Well, that's the point though, like the complaint would come in, or the problem with the policy would be recognized, and at which point council would deal with it. To that point, we have delegated the authority to the CAO. So let's say it was an inappropriate conduct, like you're suggesting. At that point, even though we delegated it to the CAO, it's still inappropriate conduct and it would still be dealt with under that. It doesn't change whether or not the action is acceptable. All it changes is that the CAO is empowered to take administrative action on legislative action. If that.
Well, I would sit better with empowered. I like that word. But anyway, it sounds like I'm a bit of a minority here, so we should move on in respect of people's time. Does anybody else have anything to say? It sounds to me like people are fine the way that this is reading, or is there any work to be done on it? Councillor Mackenzie, furrowed brow.
Yeah, I'm okay with it. I think I'm still.
If you're not ready to.
Not 100%. I need to go over this whole.
Okay, and that's the purpose of having this, is so we can, because it's a very meaty document and it's something that I don't think we've done before, and so it's a really good learning. So we can dig in. Okay, so we'll carry on.
The next section, 2.9, professional development. This is a matter of just clarifying that council is entitled to go to conferences, is entitled to take courses, is entitled to upskill if they so choose to. Not a requirement, but it puts the onus on the district to budget for it in the event council wants to execute on it.
Yeah, that one's easy. Councillor Haring, you good with that one? Yeah, no, I think it's really good. Okay, that moves us on to council meetings.
Under the council meetings, we'll start with electronic meetings. This is, again, something that was recently passed by the province with the pandemic situation. Do you want me to go through in detail on this one or stay high level on this one?
Yes.
I'm great with this section. I think it's just, this is catch up, right? Like we've been needing this.
Yeah, and I would say that the only thing, and maybe in this isn't necessarily associated to it, but one of the things that we could do is, although that we record meetings and that is one thing that we could do is stream them. And again, that really identifies what we heard from the public is wanting to have more accessibility because they have to wait until the minutes are then approved to watch it. But the streaming, whether that's done through YouTube or Facebook Live or whatever, would maybe assist with that. So I just share that.
Going to 3.3 inaugural meeting.
Oh, no, I'm going to go to 3.2. Electronic participation.
Sure.
Any comments on this one? Councillor Taylor.
So just a question, 3.2.1.4. The presiding member does not participate electronically. If the regular chair, the mayor, needs to participate, does that mean that the acting mayor would then preside over the meeting to meet that requirement? Or does it mean that the mayor can never participate electronically?
The regulations from the province requires that the presiding officer sits in person and allow for people to hear and see the proceeding at the same time and to be able to participate in the proceeding at the same time. Later on, you will see a section that allows for if a declaration of a state of emergency or something pretty drastic that really makes in-person participation untenable, that everyone can participate online, but we still will have to have a staff member or designated municipal officer present to enable the public to hear, participate in that session as well. But the province requires the presiding officer to be in person.
Offer some clarification. I worked a bit on this section. Just to clarify, it helps to look at the definition of electronic meeting and electronic participation. An electronic meeting is one where everyone is participating electronically, including the presiding person in that scenario. When we're talking about electronic participation in this section, we mean a meeting where only some of the people are participating electronically.
Yes, so I guess my question is, if the mayor can't attend in person, unlike the rest of us, he wouldn't have the option to participate electronically. Or is it he can't preside? Like, so say if the mayor was physically away but wanted to dial in to join the meeting, he could do that, but he couldn't preside, or he just can't do it.
I would say he could do it, but can't preside.
So then acting mayor presides.
As long as they're able to.
Yeah.
One question I wanted to put to council was 3.2.1.3. No more than 4 members of council participate electronically. My experience is that that's too many for our electronic participation, which is different than in state of emergency or otherwise. But I find that the Zoom participation to be very difficult with more than just a couple. I find that hard, but I was interested in your thoughts. Councillor Haring.
For me, I like the 4. I think this is a way that we allow for new moms to participate in council. This is a way that we allow for people who want to go back to school, like I just experienced or you experienced earlier in the term. And so sometimes I think that could result in 4 of us being, but as long as there's a presiding member here, I think the meeting can proceed. I think the main thing for me is that if there's 4 members and they're all digital, and that's the quorum, right? That's the only area where I start to get a little bit, blurry. But even that, I think 4 is reasonable.
Would you consider 2?
My problem with 2 is we run into that pretty regularly, where 2 are dialing in.
Well, on a positive note, there are no new moms coming up.
for 4 years, but I mean, this is
No, I know,
hopefully
but
not
we
going to
can-
get
we can
changed
amend
every
it,
couple
but
of
I-
years.
And maybe we'll have different types of electronics in 4 years. That was just my feeling, is I found that 4, I really couldn't gauge intent. There was a lot of nuances that I felt I missed, and I felt that the dialogue was not as robust as it could be. And to have 4 people participating like that, I find it challenging, and I wanted to raise that as my thought and explore what everybody else was feeling. Councillor Taylor.
So could split the difference with 3, and then that assumes that quorum is in the room,
Yeah.
and 3 online.
Councillor Mackenzie.
Yeah, I like the idea of 3 as well. You know, try to keep these Zoom meetings just when it's absolutely dire straits. I'd rather have this every time, you know. Granted, hopefully we don't run into something like we did in the past where we didn't have a choice but to do that. I mean, it worked, but it's not the ideal way to carry on. I'd rather see it like this every time if we had a choice.
Okay. Any other comments about the electronic participation? All right, I am going to draw our attention to we are on page 12 of 42, and it is 10 to 4.
This is good.
Right. So, but again, I am sensitive. We haven't even finished the agenda, people. All right. I just wanted. Okay. So I just want to draw that, you know, because we are, and it does go to, anyway, if everybody's fine proceeding, we will continue on. Yes,
Is there a change being made to
3,
3?
3,
Okay.
please.
Okay, going down to inaugural meeting. Every year, December 31st, with this proposed bylaw, we will be tabling the annual schedule of council meeting. This year is a perfect example where we have an election which changes government, the board of directors for government, and the local community charter requires that within the first 10 days of November, a meeting has to happen unless certain things are not present, like quorum for people who are newly elected, swearing into office, et cetera, et cetera. So this provision is basically stating council will continue to follow the posted schedule unless, if we switch over to 3.2, unless a quorum is not met.
I think I'm going to need to hear that again. That was.
So 3.3.1, following a local election, the first meeting of council must be held on the next regularly scheduled date according to the posted schedule.
You know what? It's okay. I thought 3.3.1 was the proposal of the dates that you were trying to figure out, and I couldn't get my head around 3rd, Tuesdays, 3rd. That's what I thought that meant. Okay, I'm good now. I'm like, 3, because we talked about doing that, right? So that's where I thought that, I'm like, okay. All right, so the first council meeting must be held in the next regular. Okay. Any questions there?
No. 3.4, time and location of the meeting. I added except for electronic meeting or when council resolved to hold a future meeting elsewhere. This is similar language to what's in our existing procedure bylaw, but the challenge here, as I was trying to operationalize this procedure bylaw in my mind, council can't, the entity of council only convenes when the gavel is banged and the presiding member says call to order. That's when the entity of council exists. Beyond that, every member is a member of council. And so I couldn't conceptualize a scenario where council could resolve to hold a meeting elsewhere unless it did so at a meeting. Because you can't pass a resolution by being a member of council outside of a council meeting. And so I wrote in here, except for electronic meetings or when council does in fact resolve to hold meeting elsewhere, all meetings will take place in the council chambers. Regular meetings will be held on the same language that exists in our procedure bylaw. The difference here is 3.4.2.2 changes from 2 p.m. to 6:30 p.m. as per previous resolution of council. 3.4.2.3, I propose that meeting be adjourned no later than 9:30 p.m. And the reason for that is because of staffing pressures. Staff will be working 8:30 to 4:30, and the turnaround time between 4:30 to 6:30, staff is usually here till 8 o'clock at night on a regular day as it is. And so we would likely be here the full day going up. The question I had to contend with, when would the council meeting reasonably end? And so we propose 9:30. However, an affirmative vote can extend that up to 11 p.m. at night.
So since we've had that discussion, I was interested in some of the feedback that you might have received. So concerns around the time would be, how does that impact when we have consultants who come in? And if those are after our billing hours, I think that there is some financial concern for that. It's not necessarily. I also recognize that, you know, staffing that is extended hours and how that plays out. For me, 6:30, you know, what I get worried about is when we have committee meetings in there, you know, I'm not sure the 3 hours is an allotment. But I wondered what feedback you had received, if any.
I haven't received any feedback from consultants. To be honest, I haven't directly asked them the impacts something like this will mean. What I can say is they will charge on an hourly basis, and the best way to figure out what the actual cost will be is to try it out and then make an assessment and see if it's still comfortable to council to accept the cost.
Councillor Haring?
Is there a way we can find out from communities? Because lots of communities do the nighttime meeting. I would love to see a cost breakdown of if doing meetings after hours costs more money to the district, because I have a feeling this is something that lots of people want for representation, but they don't think about that additional cost. So it's like, I want the representation, but I'm not going to show up. So do I want to pay the taxes if I'm not going to show up? So it would be good to just get that information from other communities. Does it raise the cost so we can present that as part of if we're doing this? The other problem for me, I see this as the first and third Tuesday. I would love to switch to a 3-week meeting cycle. I think we discussed that before. There's a lot to get done, I understand, but this gives a 3-week meeting cycle would give staff time to get things done in between meetings. And I would love to give that more of a chance. I think the flip side of that is getting done by 9:30 if we're meeting every 3 weeks might be more of a challenge. So this is the part for me that completely holds me up from wanting to approve a second, third reading. I don't want to move this forward because to me, the schedule piece is something we haven't flushed out yet. And I'd really like to spend a bit more time on that. But that's just my take on it.
So one of the things that, because I looked at a number of communities to see what time they did start, there was not a lot that had evening meetings, like 4 o'clock and different things. Whether that's a cost implication, I do know that when we made the change to 2 o'clock, we had made that shift because of the finances, and that there was significant staffing that was applied to that. Your one every 3 weeks is an interesting one. For me, I would feel better about that if we held committee meetings in advance of, so that the committee business could be brought to the council. Otherwise, I find we're in the committee, within the meeting, and then we wait another 3 weeks. So I find that the wheels of government would go even slower. But my bumper sticker reads instant gratification takes too long. So there you have it. Other comments, Councillor Frizzle?
I know that it does cost more. There's no doubt about that for staffing. And it's really hard on staff. I know that as well. I live that. I would want to know the extra cost to have consultants come in, because it will be after hours, even if it's over Zoom, there will be that extra cost of them being in the office or wherever they are, to be at a council meeting at 7 or 8 o'clock at night. So that would definitely be an added cost. So,
Councillor Mackenzie?
Yeah, I would just like to hear more. Well, if it's my understanding this past term was the first day meetings. It was always night leading up since
No.
incorporation, or no?
It's been 2 terms that we've done daytime.
It's been 2. Okay, I thought we were the first for some reason. I just would like to talk to, just hear some feedback from people that have been on those night terms, nighttime meetings, and just kind of fill us in on how that went. I understand the cost. Now you got when the consultants come up, you got hotels, food, however that all works. Like it clearly makes sense. It's going to be more costs involved, but yeah, just curious on feedback from people that have actually sat through with it.
So that would be me. And Lynn was here too. Is that it was a little bit different, but we've had to amend things, is that we did a committee meeting at 5, followed by an in-camera, which now doesn't work because we have to actually move into council first and then. So the way it was committee, then in-camera, and then the council meeting, and that started at 7. Yeah, so there was that cost too. So there was meals, and which weren't very healthy. So it was really a negative. And then it was, I mean, the very first council, they had late meetings. They were going till 10 and 11. And I know that there's councils that have gone and they go traditionally late. The school district in 8 years, we've maybe gone past 9 o'clock, like not an abundance of times. Last night was one of them. You know, I think it's difficult for small towns because council is not the career. It is a position of service, and daytime does interfere with that. And I think we all agreed that negated, you experience it yourself. I think you addressed it in the fact that you relied on your team to assist getting you. So
For
it
sure,
is the function of council and how that works.
That's right.
Councilor Taylor? Some sage insight from you.
It's tricky. Like it's really tricky. There's pros and cons to both options, both in terms of benefits to councillors themselves, benefits to staff, like one option versus another. So I don't think there's going to be a perfect solution, and I think it's probably going to be a matter of going with something that everyone can at least get comfortable with, and seeing how it goes for a year. Because I don't think there's one perfect answer that meets the needs of everything.
So is it considered in other areas? And I think Revelstoke does it, where you have committee meetings, and they can be held at perhaps 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock, and then those items are then referred to council, and then council is in the evening. But just making those referrals does facilitate timelines. What's your experience?
The referral process, so the challenge with that model is anything decided at the committee level will have to be introduced as a late item to the council meeting. because the
Only if
agenda-
it's on the same day. But if it's not,
Right,
right? So if you break up the series of it, then the work could be done at the committee meetings,
correct.
right? And then referred. And I don't think we've got anything in here that says it has to be a committee of the whole. You can have set committees with members, and they can be open to other council members attending those committee meetings if so be it. And then it's referred to council. Councillor Haring?
My concern is we moved in after hiring our new CAO, we've been moving pretty steadily in the direction of trying to reduce the administrative burden that council is creating for staff, right? And my fear is that by having, say, a committee meeting in the middle, you're actually increasing the number of meetings that are happening, and thus making even a larger commitment for staff to organize. And because all of these things require an agenda, an approved agenda, that's going to require a meeting between department managers and staff. Like, we're starting to eat into staff time. For me, the idea of going to a 3-week cycle between meetings is to slow us down. I think we've significantly overstretched our staff resources by, being a pretty go-getter council. And I think, to be honest, like, if we could give our staff the chance to implement our decisions, it may slow us down in terms of policy, but I think we're at a good place in the district. We have a really nice foundation underneath us. Maybe it's time to slow down and get the work done and have council take on the role of only making decisions when we need to, and, kind of limit our impact on staff. Because I think about that, what was it, 170 priorities that you had when you first started with us?
111.
Yeah.
But a good example of that would be the week where Mayor Blackwell, Councillor Mackenzie, and I went to UBCM. And this document was due on the agenda that Friday night. I had no capacity to finish that document. So I came back the Saturday, the Sunday, and Monday. I spent at home completing the research, completing the writing, review. As council would remember, I didn't even edit the document that made the first agenda. I edited the Tuesday at the office, and then I updated the package. So it's really challenging to meet the 2-week cycle because we really have 5 days in between.
Except for the fact that in here, we can actually cancel a council meeting as long as we don't do, and because UBCM does now happen, right, in person. So we can identify that in the calendar cycle. Go ahead, Councillor Haring.
Yeah, to me, it's not about one exception. It's about the speed at which we're pushing staff in a time where we can't afford additional staff. The labor market doesn't support us recruiting additional staff. So if we burn out our people, we lose our people. And that's my fear where we are right now. I really think that we should amend this, come back to it with the whole group, and talk about a 3-week council cycle. That's my take on this approach.
In the spirit of our 4-year relationship together, I wholeheartedly disagree with you. I worry that it just slows, and I think that governments are accused of being slow anyway. I see that there is more work to be done. We have to streamline the efficiencies and be strategic, but to at least come back for discussion, not necessarily action. But I look at what our public has asked from us, and that's, we've got housing ahead of us. We've got some recruitment and retention pieces. We've got some policy pieces. We have, an economic development plan that's going to be implemented. Like, we have work to be done, and to meet, once every 3 weeks. And if you actually go through how many meetings we have a year, there are significant, breaks. I would be very reluctant. In fact, if yeah, that's a strong one for me. But I'm one voice. I'd like to flesh out the idea of having the committee meetings and then a council meeting, which would flow into your 3 weeks. So not do 2 council meetings, but the committee meeting and then the council meeting. So we're feeding work and then summarizing them at that council meeting.
That's still 6 meetings every, what is it? No, 2 meetings every 3 weeks. So we're still looking at a similar number of meetings to every 2 weeks then.
Oh, look, I win. I never win, Bill. Okay, so where do we want to go, council? We're stuck on this. We've agreed that this is not an easy decision, that life is complicated, and living in a small town and serving on council is hard. Councillor Taylor.
So a question at this point with where we are, say if we were to continue and have all amendments like through the entire document, would we then go to second or third reading today with those amendments and still be able to have it adopted at special meeting? I'm kind of at the point now where I'm like, are we trying to do too much today? And whether we take these, we carry this forward to special council meeting everyone kind of goes through pages 14 to 42, highlights everything that they want to address, and that we have a very targeted agenda to do that. Then go to second and third reading in the special meeting and adopt at the next meeting, which is the inaugural meeting, which would have to be at 2 o'clock, but then the following, it could go to 6:30 if that were the wish of council.
Councillor Haring?
I'm happy with anything that stalls this.
Okay, Councillor Mackenzie?
Yeah, I like where Councillor Taylor was going with that. It'd be nice to push it off for a little bit and have, but just trying to wrap my head around the time frame of it all, if it's a feasible option to do that, but I like where you're going with that.
I think, and you know, Mr. Thomas, I think you've created a very comprehensive document. And you know, if this was done in 2 days, imagine what you could have done with 2 months. You know, and the work. But I mean, I look at, we've got, you know, council proceedings. I mean, there's a lot of new information here that I think needs to be digested and understood and decided on. If we value the work that's been done and the amendments that we've put forward, does this mean that we have to have our inaugural meeting at 2 p.m. or can we make a special time adjustment for?
I believe the current procedure bylaw, let me just check.
Did we just pass that on the, oh, we haven't, no, it's at the bottom of the inaugural meeting. That's where our next section is. Oh, no, we've done that. So we. If a quorum. Okay,
Until this proposed bylaw is adopted and the existing one is repealed, the Bible that I have to follow, proverbial Bible, is the existing bylaw.
okay.
So 5.1 of the existing bylaw states that all council meetings must take place within the District of Clearwater Municipal Hall, except when council resolves to hold meetings elsewhere. The corporate officer is to give notice of the different meeting place by posting a notice of the change on the public notice posting place at least 24 hours prior to the time of the council meeting. Regular council meeting must be held on the first or third Tuesday of each month, with the exceptions of July, August, and December, in which only one meeting will be held on the second Tuesday of July, third Tuesday of August, and first Tuesday of December. Begins at 2 p.m. So we will have to hold it at 2 p.m. I want to see if there's any reference to the inaugural meeting.
At the inaugural meeting, it doesn't, there is reference to bylaw 161. Do you have a copy of 161? I couldn't find that one on the website. So
we're gonna check our
okay.
our files.
I mean, if we follow, if it's always been the same, then we've had it at 7 o'clock at the night, and that's the way we've done it. So for the inaugural, it was, yeah. Mhm. Even for my first council, it was still, oh, but it was in the evening then too, yeah. My risk tolerance is fine for that.
I don't see any provision that speaks to, oh, no, I'm incorrect. Section 4 of the current procedure bylaw, following a general election, the first council meeting must be held on the first Tuesday of November in the year of the general election, as per section 124 of the community charter. If a quorum of council member elected at a general local election has not taken office by the date of the meeting referred to in section 4.1, the first council meeting must be called by the corporate officer and held as soon as reasonably possible after the quorum has taken office. It does not say that it has to be at 7 p.m. or any other time.
No.
And so I would assume, unless it's being designated as a special council meeting, it will have to be held at 2 p.m. If it's a special council meeting, the time can be set anytime council wishes.
Seems like it's a special meeting.
It can be.
I would say so, yeah, it should be.
So we are now at the stage where we've decided to lay this down. Okay. Mr. Thomas, you've got,
Sorry, what was the question?
no, there's no question. It's just that we've decided to lay this down.
Yep.
And we'll continue on next week at the meeting that's been called.
Totally.
That's fine. So with that, I just need a motion to move from the committee of the whole. Oh, go ahead,
Yes,
sir.
but before you do,
Yeah.
what was the bylaw number you said? Something?
161 in
161.
the District of Clearwater, the council procedure that was, there's a little star here that says bylaw 161 as reference to 4.1, but I couldn't find bylaw 161.
So bylaw 161 was actually an amendment to the procedure bylaw implemented in August 18, 2017. And
So what
given-
number did it become?
it doesn't become anything. What we did, we consolidated the bylaw with the existing text of the procedure bylaw. So if you look on page or section 4 of the current procedure bylaw, you will see a box next to it, bylaw 161 reference.
Sorry,
That's
page
the
4?
proposed bylaw, the current one.
the current one. I do see that on the current bylaw. Is that what you're saying? To repeat again?
Yes,
Yeah.
on the current bylaw,
Yeah,
for example, section 4,
yeah.
there is a box with an arrow.
Yeah, no,
That-
that's
yeah.
why, because then I went to the arrow but I couldn't find where 161 was, but you're saying it's because it's been consolidated.
Yeah, no, what I'm saying is bylaw 161
Mhm.
created the new 4.1 of the procedure bylaw.
Okay,
Do you mind if I approach?
no, of course not. Yep.
This bylaw
Mm-hmm.
added this to the existing.
Okay, so I was looking for an actual bylaw 161. I didn't understand the boxes.
So this document is consolidated. and
Yeah.
this-
Okay, that's how that works. Okay, that's fine. 'Cause I understood that from bylaw 256 in the 2021 amendment, but I didn't understand the rest. Okay. Right. Yeah, and same with bylaw 179 then. Okay, that's excellent information. Anyway, motion to move from committee of the whole. Does anybody want to discuss this great decision? No.
No.
All in favor? Great. Okay, well, that was rough. Now we're gonna go to another bylaw. Well, I think so. We're gonna go to amending the subdivision and development highway bylaw number 271. Oh. What am I gonna read on this? The whole thing? To the line? Okay, thanks. Okay, great, thanks. Bylaw number 271, 2022, a bylaw to amend District of Clearwater Subdivision and Development Highway Standards Bylaw 111. Whereas Council has adopted Subdivision and Development Highway Standards Bylaw number 111, and whereas Council deems it desirable to amend Bylaw 111 and the desirable changes to the bylaw have been considered. Now therefore, the Council of the District of Clearwater in an open meeting assembled and acts as follows. This bylaw may be cited as the District of Clearwater Subdivision and Development Highway Standard Bylaw number 111, Amendment Bylaw 271, 2022. Any discussion on that? Discussion? This is perfect. Okay, all in favor? Motion carries. Okay, well, that was easy, sort of. Okay. The permissive tax exemption, bylaw number 273. All right, so the recommendation that the District of Clearwater permissive tax exemption for places of worship, bylaw 273. A bylaw to provide for tax exemption in accordance with section 224 of the community charter for a 5-year term. And whereas section 224(2)(f) of the community charter provides for the exemption of any area of land surrounding an exempted building of worship or any church hall considered by council to be necessary to the exempted building and the land on which the church hall stands. Now therefore, Council of the District of Clearwater in open meeting assembled enacts as follows: that this bylaw may be cited as the District of Clearwater permissive tax exemption for places of worship bylaw 273/2022. Thank you very much, Councillor Frizzle, seconded by Councillor Mackenzie. Any discussion on this? I think the only discussion is that it was quite interesting that last week or last meeting that we identified that this applies to just the land that the building is on. All those in favor? Motion carries. Okay, that gets us to correspondence, page 103, Purple Thursday, correspondence at response required. So the proclamation of Purple Thursday. Before we read this or identify, does anybody have any comments or thoughts on this? Mr. Thomas, is there any contribution of staff on what this might entail, or would it require anything? I've never seen this before, but I might be wrong.
Yeah, this is first.
I'll speak to it just to say that there isn't a lot. This was dropped off by hand just as we were assembling the agenda and requested that by a representative, I believe, of the that they would like to see it on the agenda. I offered to put it in. I said that it would have to go into correspondence, and they're looking for the signature of the mayor on their documents.
Oh, let's just do that. Yeah, and I guess when we sign something like this, is the proclamation of is it's one thing just to sign it, but it's another thing to do it. So for me, like it's signing doesn't have the meaning of actually doing something, and just the proclamation in such short time frame. It's not that I don't support it, but I don't want to be somebody that just signs something without an activity.
Mhm.
So perhaps that we could just acknowledge that there is a proclamation of Purple Thursday on October 20th, and just acknowledge that these efforts are across the province, and we look forward to being included for next year. Does that work? No?
So the District of Clearwater elected official represented by the mayor can declare the day as acquired brain injury and has adopted brain injury awareness and prevention as their official cause. Yes, they've done that. Purple Thursday as a special day of recognition. Council can't make a motion only to recognize it without also proclaiming it on this particular item. It's a decision to proclaim it or to not proclaim it.
Yeah, so I think what I just said is that we just acknowledge that it's done. It's not we are proclaiming, it's that we're acknowledging for exactly those reasons, if that is agreeable to council. Okay, do we need a motion to acknowledge it, or is that just fine for Michael? What do you think? Can we just acknowledge, do we need a motion for that, or is that just enough to cite it at the meeting here?
You would need a motion.
Okay, so if council is amiable that we just recognize the provincial effort.
Make a motion that we
Receive and acknowledge.
receive and acknowledge the proclamation of Purple Thursday, and that we look forward to supporting the work of the Royal Purple in the future. I don't know if that takes it too far, or yeah.
I think there's a friendly amendment is just to acknowledge acknowledge that the Royal Purple is an asset to our community. Did you catch that? Okay. Do I have a seconder?
I'll second that.
Great. Any discussion on that?
Yes.
Yes.
I would like to maybe somehow get the word out that if they want us to make a proclamation, that maybe they should come and talk to us about it. I think, I feel like
To make a presentation.
make a presentation. I feel like that somebody should have been here to sort of explain everything to us just a little bit more, and that would have been
Great.
it made it a little bit stronger.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
Not that it's not a good.
no, it's important. And I think getting some of the background and the
Yeah.
statistics, and it would be very interesting to see how other areas also acknowledge this. So, okay. All in favor? Motion carries. Where are we at? Then the correspondence for information items. We've got the building inspection services report. We have no notice of motions, there's no other business. And do we have any comments from the public? Yeah. Yeah. Good news, we've only done the first third of it, so that there will, um, so we'll dissect it, and we'll just let the will of council decide how this plays out. But it's been a good exercise in understanding some of the work that our CAO has provided to us. Well, they are certainly going to be included with it, and I think that it was a very valuable exercise in learning how this bylaw has been enhanced. The extended definitions of things were really helpful, and also just understanding what the next phase might look at. I don't think that there's going to be any exclusion, but I really appreciate that you've got care and concern for the new team. Thank you. At the inaugural meeting, it'll be the first meeting there. Any other comments? Yeah. No, in fact, the CAO's brought that to us before, is how to manage that. And you're absolutely right with your observations. It's how to streamline the efficiency. So it's really good to get that reinforced thought. Like, that's valuable input. Thank you. Go. Actually, it was always parking there. It was never clarified. So it's the way it is, always is. The good news is that nothing in life is forever cemented. And one of the things that has been discussed is what kind of resources would be extended to make it a really good solution. And I'm really excited the fact that that topic really got conversations going. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And guess what? Not all of us are skinny, so I'm with you. I hear you. I think that one of the things that we did learn, and Councillor Taylor being on the Trails Task Force, is that there was that, and Mr. Thomas, you can correct, but that road designation was called what? That actually facilitated? It's actually deemed a residential. So what was exciting, and please weigh in, is that we learned how our community uses that road as a result of this. So as complicated and challenging and hard to hear that we heard so much, it was actually invaluable. Councillor Taylor, did you want to add anything else?
The only other thing I'll add is the safety was why we did it, for the safety of pedestrians and the kids getting out at the beach and the cyclists. And so it's it wasn't there. The intent was always positive around safety. And yeah, it's opened up great conversation. And I think new council will continue working towards that. The good news is we're in the off season now, so that buys us some time. And before you know it, the snow will be on the ground and we won't see any lines. So.
And you've agreed to join the Trails Task Force.
No, I didn't say that.
Yeah, and again, good feedback, and that's exactly it. I mean, that was one of those ones. And you know what I'm sort of proud of is that there's been lots of decisions, but of all the ones that was made, we've had very few that have erupted in that type of discussion, and that was actually quite heartening to me. Like, right? So. Yeah. Yeah. So, and again, correct me, but one of the reasons we've kept it is because to change it is additional cost at the moment, and to change without having that thoughtful contemplation to get it better, it didn't seem to be a good use of money, given the fact that people are really asking for another way to use that road and to allocate space. Does that make sense? I know. I know. We all joke. We did. Yeah. And you know what? The intent was absolutely there, as Councillor Taylor said. So yeah. Any other comments? Great. Well, it was a great pleasure having you all here. Thank you very, very much. We now need to move into an in-camera. Great. Seconded? Great. Councillor Mackenzie, all in favor? Motion carries. Let's come back quickly. Can we do 5 minutes? 4:35. We'll be back. 3 minutes, people. 3 minutes.